Hello and welcome to this careers workshop by Habiba Islam. This session is for people who already have some ideas about what they want to work on, but have some uncertainties. It'll probably be not as useful for people who've done a lot of career planning or already have had 80,000 hours advising. Habiba is an advisor at 80,000 hours. She previously served as the senior administrator for the Future of Humanity Institute and the Global Priorities Institute at Oxford. Before that, she qualified as a barrister and worked in management consulting at PwC, specializing in operations for public and third sector clients. Please give a warm welcome to Habiba.
Okay, hello everyone. How are we feeling today? Yeah? Were you at the opening talk? Okay, nice. Hopefully very hyped for a good weekend. Thanks for coming along. Seems like this is going to be a nice kind of little intimate careers planning workshop, which seems good. And lots of people have a lot of time hopefully to chat to each other about career stuff. Like I said in the intro, this is a workshop for I guess just being able to get a bit of time at the beginning of the weekend to set aside some time to think about kind of career planning things, some of your uncertainties, have a chance to chat to some other people to get some more ideas, and then be able to take some of those thoughts and be able to do things with them for the rest of the weekend. So it's generally pitched for if you have some ideas about career stuff, but some uncertainties, which is kind of most people, but you haven't gone really far down the road of talking to 5 million people having done the 20-page Google Doc about your career. If you've done that, there's probably not very much more that I'm going to be able to say in this particular workshop that's going to be super useful for you. And we're not really going to go into anything about picking a cause area today. I do think that's super important, but I think there'll be lots of other opportunities to think about that kind of stuff elsewhere. So any stage is fine, any cause area and skill set is fine. I'm not going to say anything that's specific to those. This is kind of agnostic in those sense. Cool. Yeah, and whether you're thinking about I need to make a decision right now about what job to go for, or I'm job hunting right now, or you're just kind of generally thinking about planning ahead your career, hopefully this should still be useful. I think feel kind of free. I want to make sure you feel free to see if this is being useful for you. If you have one-to-ones halfway through or something, or this is not ending up being useful, feel free, empowered to go and do other stuff with your time. I'm just very happy for you to do that. I want to make sure that your weekend is as useful as possible. Cool. Okay. So in this workshop, like I said, we're going to do a bit of writing out some of your your key uncertainties around career stuff. Brainstorm some ideas for what you can do and get some input from other people. And then at the end, we're going to set aside some time so that you can actually take some actions and set some stuff up specifically for this weekend to try and make some progress on those. You can, there'll be a few exercises where I'll ask you to write stuff down. You're more than welcome to do that on your phone. If you wanted some pen and papers, there's stuff at the front though. Okay, that all makes sense? We good to go? Okay, I'm seeing some nods, good. Okay, so starting off with career planning in general. So I don't know what you guys feel about career planning, but personally, I do think that certainly before I worked at 80,000 hours, I would be really put off by the idea of doing career planning. I think that I kind of had this association that the kind of person who does lots of career planning has this kind of Gantt chart on the bedroom wall, which sort of shows every year of their life where they're going to be and what they're going to be doing and which role they want to go for. And that I don't think is useful and is not what I would encourage people to actually do. I think the thing that I think is useful is having some sense of what you want to achieve, where you want to get to, and some sense of how you might get from here to there. But fundamentally, the really important thing is having a sense of what are the questions you have about that, what are the uncertainties that you have about that quote-unquote plan. And so insofar as you have those uncertainties, the real core, I think, of a career plan is working out how you're going to make progress on those uncertainties. So roughly, what I'm talking about here is a little bit something maybe you have an idea that you could see yourself one day working in emerging tech policy, or maybe as a lawyer in an animal welfare charity, and you're a little bit uncertain between these two things. You're kind of currently studying law or something. So you have some sense of like the paths that you could go for, but maybe some of the uncertainties you have are like, which of these am I going to enjoy the most? Like, am I going to be really good at this? Like, how competitive is the field? Like, which is the one that has the most demand? So you have like a bunch of these uncertainties. And then the really cool part of the career plan, I think, is trying to work out, okay, how are you going to reduce that uncertainty? How are you going to find out where the demand is? How are you going to find out whether you enjoy this or not? Are there things that you can do to try and make yourself less uncertain? So that is, I think, the thing that I'm most excited about people doing a bunch of when they're thinking about career planning, and hopefully some of the stuff that we think about today will help with some of that. Does that sound okay? Cool, more nods, I like it. Okay, so a lot of this is within the context of, because this is like Saturday morning, you've got plenty of time to be doing a bunch of stuff over the next couple of days. So just to like fire some thoughts about things that you could do during this conference that you might be able to, actions that you might be able to take, things that you might be able to like get out of this for career planning. There's like a bunch of different things. There's a bunch of like information that you can get from this conference, information about different course areas or like career paths or routes in, but you can also get things that isn't just information. You can get like advice, specific advice from people about different fields, or even just like different frameworks or perspectives or angles on the thing that you hadn't thought about before. And like hugely, you can make new connections, and whether that's with organizations that you might want to work for, funding opportunities, people just doing something similar to you, or mentors. And then the last thing is kind of like maybe actually just generally getting this like sense of inspiration out of the weekend. So just wanted to like throw that up there as like things you can be musing on that you might want to get out of the conference. And maybe some of these things in bold seem like some of the like things that you might want to particularly focus on, or like could be like particularly useful. Yeah, and thinking about them because of this workshop within the frame of reference of thinking about careers decisions as well. Yeah, so I'm going to go through a little bit more about some like first kind of thoughts about career planning first before we jump into you guys doing some exercises. So here are a few of my a few heuristics that you might want to bear in mind for thinking about career stuff. So I think the first one is this kind of idea of like, know what you're aiming for, know what you're actually wanting to get out of this. So just like a sense of like being clear about your goals, and understanding that this classic EA idea that different opportunities vary pretty widely in terms of impact. Some things are just like vastly more effective or more impactful than others. And so knowing really, if you like have a really clear sense of what you want to achieve, then a lot of other decisions kind of flow through from that. Yeah, so I often talk to people who are weighing up different kinds of career paths. And one thing that can really help them is thinking about what's the story here? Like, what's the route to impact? What's the thing that I would hopefully be ending up doing if I did each of these different paths? And actually linking that to what is it that they actually want to achieve, I think can be like an important piece of the sort of making decisions. Another thing is this general sense of the shape of your career over the course of your life. So I don't know if you've heard, but you have 80,000 hours in your career to spend. And so how should you be spending that time? Well, there may be these like different stages to your career, and sort of earlier on, you might be relatively wanting to focus more on exploring different things, finding what's your niche, finding what you're really, really good at. When you like hit upon something, then you might want to invest in getting really good at that. And then at some point you want to keep your eyes open for the opportunities to start using all of those skills, cash it in, and be doing a bunch of good with those skills. And so like roughly I've described that like it's this kind of sequential thing, one after the other. Though to be clear, I think there's like often going to be a mix of the different things at each different stage, and yeah, so you might have like opportunities for each of them at different points. But this is like trying to like keep in mind that your career is something that lasts many decades long, and probably the time that you'll be the most impactful in doing the most, have the most power and influence and like responsibility and bigger team, bigger budget is probably like later on in your career. So taking this really like long view of your career. And so if you're in the room and you're a little bit more earlier stage, then the emphasis being like a little bit more on exploration. If you're like a bit later on, maybe one of the things that I would say is that by now your skills might actually be more valuable than you think. And so like probably you should be like looking for those opportunities to switching into doing good. If you've already got like even like 2 or 3 years of like solid experience under your belt, possibly you could be switching sooner than you might think. Okay, and then my last kind of like headline-ish thing that I like to bear in mind for career planning, which I think if you come from the opening talk, you might have heard Toby and Will talking about this, is this kind of idea of aiming high, being ambitious. And there's lots of good reasons to do this. I think one of the things I like to emphasize is that you're just really just taking ownership of your own career. Like this is your life. This is your career. So rather than kind of like, I think it's very tempting or very easy to kind of like drift from one opportunity to another, to things that fall in your lap, to the path that's like most available to you, or your friends are doing, or your parents did, or something like that. Taking a lot more like ownership of that and like actively aiming for something that you think is like could be really good. And just really internalizing this idea of, yeah, you actually just really could work on the thing that you think is the most important. I think there's a lot of people who maybe think a bit like, sure, I kind of think that like XYZ is like maybe the biggest issue. Like maybe I would really prefer to like improve democratic decision making in the US, or like maybe I think that X risk is like the biggest deal, but I don't really see how like my skill set could really work on there, and I'm not really sure I'm like quite the right fit for that. I think I would encourage you to like be a bit more ambitious there, and like see if you can find a niche to actually use your career working on the thing that you really just do think is the most important. I think that that's just like more possible than you might have thought. And if you haven't even spent some time kind of brainstorming how that might be true, then that definitely seems worthwhile doing to me. Okay, so those are my sort of heuristics to bear in mind is like being really clear about what you're aiming for, thinking about your career over these like multiple decade-long time frames, and like being ambitious, aiming high as you go. So time for a first kind of like exercise. So just to set the scene for the rest of the discussion for the workshop, I want to get you to just like spend a bit of time writing down what are the main paths that you're considering right now? What are the main options that you've got? This might be a list that you already have like pretty cached in your head, but just like getting it down on paper. So I'm going to describe these as like longer term paths that you might be aiming for. So rather than thinking, so at least maybe we're gonna write down both, but I think the emphasis being relatively on where do you kind of see yourself going over like a longer term time frame. Describing this in the sense of a path, so that involves both the kind of area that you might want to work on and the kind of role that you might see yourself doing. So that could be something like running your own kind of nonprofit organization that is like focused on animal welfare issues, or it could be something like being a lobbyist who is like specializes in climate change kind of and renewable energies or something like that. So you probably have some ideas of this, maybe already, but if so, that's great, just like write them down. If you haven't got like ever made this list explicitly before, it could be useful to just like write down a few things and maybe be quite expansive in this exercise and write down a few like of your more like speculative options here. And if you can, having like a bit of a loose like ranking of like roughly what seems like the most plausible one that you're kind of like most excited about right now. Yeah, if you have time as well, then you can also write down a bit about what your immediate next step career options are, but I think relatively you're going to put the emphasis more on the longer term paths. Okay, so the exercise is I'm going to give you like 5 minutes and just like write down your options and like roughly try and rank them if you can. If you want paper and pen, there's some at the front here, or feel free to use just like a digital device. Does that seem good? Okay, 5 minutes, off you go. Give me another wave if you want a bit more time. Okay. Well, people who are still going, you can carry on going. We're gonna quickly do a little bit of the next exercise. So this next thing is focusing on that uncertainties piece. So now you've got your kind of like list of like these options. If you had to like pick between these, what are the biggest uncertainties that you have about this decision? So it could be anything. It could be about the kind of like area to work on, like is this like how impactful it is. It could be about like how much it needs more people in it. It could be a bit more about the career path specifically, like is that a good fit for you? How competitive is it? What are the best ways in? yeah, writing out some of those uncertainties. I mean, I think there's going to be like uncertainties that are a mile long here. So prioritize, I guess, like the biggest uncertainties that you have, specifically focusing on maybe the ones that would be like enough to swing the decision and change the priority ranking that you have here. So like maybe you have your like kind of best guess about what's the top one, but yeah, what would be enough to like change that to something else? Another kind of prompt that you could use is, if you could get the definitive answer to one question, what would be that most useful question to have answered about this decision? So I'm going to give you a bit more time to just like list out some of the uncertainties you have about this career kind of choice that you're considering right now. Going to again give you 5 minutes for this, and then we'll have a chance to like kind of share these thoughts with like some other people in the audience and like get some more external input. Off you go. Not many. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next one. But yeah, if you're still thinking, that is totally fine. There'll be plenty of time to carry on writing stuff. Okay, so that's enough. Hopefully that's enough like first kind of brainstorm of writing stuff down. I think it would be good to get a bit of input from some other people. So this is like getting you in the EAG mindset of like chatting to everyone you can grab about your career. So yeah, just want to get you guys into like maybe like groups of what naturally sort of feels like a good number. So either groups of 2 or 3 if you just want to shuffle next to each other. Maybe two or three seem like about good, so you have enough chance to go through the things and just like share with the other people some of the like the top kind of paths that you're thinking about and some of the top uncertainties that you have. You might need to give a little bit of background about who you are and what you're about. And then the people that you're talking to, yeah, just do a bit of like, see if you can just like sense check this a bit. See if you can like get us like thinking about some of those like prompts we were talking about at the beginning. Like, do these seem like ambitious kind of plans so far? Do they seem, from what they've said so far, does it feel like they're missing anything pretty like major that they should be considering? Yeah, and then when they're thinking about the uncertainties, are there any kind of like slightly more crucial questions that it seems like they're sort of, that would be really relevant to this decision that are sort of missing? And feel free to say extremely obvious things here. You don't have to like come up with some like galaxy brain insight in 2 minutes. It's actually just incredibly useful sometimes to say like pretty obvious things, to have like a sense check from some like impartial third party who's like, oh, it seems like you're thinking about these 2 different things. Have you ever thought about like how much you enjoy that before? And sometimes that can be like actually something that someone hasn't really thought about. Okay, so I'm going to give you like 15 minutes to chat, and then like plausibly if people want to feedback afterwards, that'd be great. So like make sure you have a chance to talk about each of your different like ideas and like get a bit of like feedback from different people. Okay, 15 minutes, and yeah, shuffle into like groups of like 2 or 3. Off you go. Okay, gonna call it there, folks. I'm sure there's lots more you could carry on talking about, but I'm going to pause it there for a second. And then there'll be more time to chat, so you can pick up on some of the threads of conversation in just a second. Would anyone be up for sharing some of the thoughts on their discussion just briefly with the group? No worries if not, we can move on. But yeah, does anyone want to, like, I hope you found that chat useful. Is anyone up for like sharing some of the stuff that you discussed, or any of the kind of like useful conversations that you just, like, thoughts that people have shared just then? Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so me and Rona had a really like good chat about our career uncertainties, and I think we're quite similar in that we're both doing some community organizing. So to give a bit of background, I am a mechanical engineer at a car company, but I also co-founded High Impact Engineers, and I guess my crucial kind of uncertainty is whether or not to quit engineering and go into full-time community organizing. It's been a struggle to find the time to do as much community organizing as I wanted to, and I've taken on some brilliant like co-organizers, and they've done fantastic work, but they don't want to keep doing it like forever. And I think it's been really valuable having actual engineers doing high impact engineering rather than like specifically ops people. So I'm at a point in my career where it's quite difficult to just take time out and do community organizing for a year. So I guess my biggest uncertainty is how much of a barrier is there to going back into a technical field like engineering after taking time out to do community organizing.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think this is like, this is a thing that I think often is really good for people to think about like keep like option value, and can you keep, how much are you closing the door on things? How much do you have this like the option to go back? One thing that I think often people don't, like maybe sometimes an extra, like if you talk to a friend about this, or you talk to someone else who maybe isn't as in the weeds as you are, they can often like suggest whether you can sometimes have your cake and eat it. Sometimes you can get best of both worlds and you don't realize. Sometimes, it might not be the case for you, but like some large corporate organizations are very happy to let you take like extended periods of unpaid leave, or like do secondments elsewhere, and sometimes people don't think to ask. Other times when you're like, having to make a decision between two different things, and it feels like I can't do this one, I have to like choose between. If you like ask them, can I extend the deadline? Could I like defer, start this one later? Like some of these things can like dissolve the problem entirely. And I feel like it's a great kind of example when like chatting to someone about some of the uncertainties can actually end up dissolving them a little. But yeah, great. I love how you crystallized this like big question about like, what do I even do? Like to like something that's very like attackable, to work out, okay, one of the really crucial things is like, can I come back? And then that sort of, it feels like from that you can flow some like specific actions you can take. Seems good. Okay, in the interest of time, I'm gonna leave it there, but like we can come back to another group when we do one of the next ones. So yeah, we've got some of these uncertainties. We've got some like options, some decisions, some uncertainties, but like how to make that decision. So there's the next obvious question is like, how do we make progress on those uncertainties? So like one general thing I want to like say here, which you may have come across before, but I think is worth repeating, is that when you're trying to explore something new, it's really helpful to try and construct yourself this kind of ladder of cheap tests or like increasingly costly tests. So the point is that it's really hard to go from like 0 to 100, from like just having graduated and not having really any idea about these different paths to like suddenly being like signed up for this like thing full time and trying it out for a full few years. And that doesn't have to be so stark. There are ways that you can like increasingly test your fit for things. So you can start off by just doing some like desk-based research. You can like, if there's something that you're kind of interested in, you can like read a bit about it, just do some like basic kind of like research about what are these different pods actually like, what do people say about them. 8,000 Hours has like career reviews which are like super designed for this kind of thing, but there's also other stuff out there. But then you can do some of this like speaking to people, starting off by just spending like a couple of hours exploring a particular path. So if you start off with this very like long list of different things, you can do these steps for quite a few different areas and like gather a bunch of shallow information first, and then get a sense of like, you can rule some things out quite quickly, even at this stage. But if there are ones that you're still interested in and exploring a bit more, then you get like a bit more serious, and you can spend like a solid like 20 hours kind of like, there's a rough kind of guess of like how much more investigation you want to do. This is like actually like reading more books about the thing, or like speaking to a ton more people, doing what you might call like informational interviews about the different paths. And this one's bolded because like EAG is like particularly good time for doing a bunch of these like one-to-ones. So far this has been like very like kind of information gathery. I think the step that's then really useful for people to do is to like pivot into actually trying out doing the thing as much as you can. Like there's basically like no better test for are you good at it, do you enjoy it, than actually just trying to do it. And this can be like easier or harder to do depending on what else is going on in your life. So if you happen to be lucky enough to be like while you're studying or while you're doing a PhD or something like that, or even if your job leaves you with like enough time to do stuff on the side, then there's just like opportunities to do side projects or volunteering, stuff on the weekends, like maybe like short kind of projects even within your kind of like studies or work or something, taking like a week to 4 weeks at a time, trying something out. Like starting out trying writing is like a classic example of like, if you're thinking of becoming a journalist, like do some blogging. If you're thinking of doing like community organizing, like try and do like a workplace group or something like that. And then again, so this like 1 to 4 weeks is like, can be relatively easy to arrange. If you have the opportunity, then trying to do something that's like a bit longer than that is also just really helpful before you dive in fully. So this we can get like to something that's like a couple of months long to even, this range is quite large and can even include trying something out for a couple of years. So this could be something like a longer work placement, a longer secondment. It could be like an internship or a fellowship. It could even be like do a master's that takes like a year or 2 years. And all of this is like, it's getting increasingly more costly. You're investing more and more in like getting more information about this path and trying it out. But if you can try and do some of these different steps before you go straight into like job applications for the thing that, if I do this, then I'll stay in it for like 20 years, that would be ideal. So depending on where you are with some of your uncertainties, maybe you might want to think about which stage you're at in this kind of test for that particular path, and whether there are more things in that kind of category that you can be doing right now to help you make progress on your uncertainties and like reduce your uncertainty. So I think it would just be helpful to just spend a bit of time like brainstorming some of the actions that you could take to answer the uncertainties that you've already like identified. So there's like a ton of different things here. It could be like doing more information gathering, a ton of different resources. Are there like resources that you can like tap into? Could be like about getting information from other people. Often this is like a really like shortcut way to get a bunch more information. And like maybe you want to ask people sooner than you think. Sometimes people are like keen to spend a lot of time on the resources before they start asking people, and like that might be a bit of a mistake because people can like accelerate your exploration if you just ask them sooner. There's maybe some stuff that you might want to do more introspection or reflection about, especially if you're thinking about, how much do I enjoy this thing? Like, does this really energize me? That's quite hard to get that much external like information about. Like, kind of you have the best information here, and so you might want to do some sort of sitting down and doing like an energy audit, thinking a bit about the activities that you've done over the last month or so, and like which ones like really like hit a chord for you, didn't feel like work, and which ones were like an absolute drain and you really struggled to do them. Sometimes actually like organizing your thoughts and actually writing them down is like hugely clarifying, and people get a lot more out of that than you might expect. And then there's also like this kind of like fuzzy category of like, yeah, there's a lot of these things that would be good to do, but maybe there's something like a bit more structured around actually getting the time to do it. So like maybe you actually just need to like set some time aside, carve some time out in your schedule, have someone else hold you accountable, do it with someone else to try and make sure that you actually like do that reading group, or both together do a bunch of your kind of like reflections or something like that. So those are just like some ideas of things that some actions that you might take to reduce your uncertainties. There's probably loads more. Yeah, what I'd like to do is give you another few minutes to think through the uncertainties that are written down, brainstorm some like actions that you could take that would actually try and answer them, or at least make you less uncertain about the thing. Does that make sense as an exercise? Yep. Okay. Cool. I'm gonna give you much less time than is on the screen there. I'm gonna give you 3 minutes because I want you to be able to chat to each other afterwards. So off you go now. Okay, I'm sure there's so much more you could talk about, but in the interest of making sure I send you off at the end of the workshop, I'm going to pause it there. But yeah, hopefully you came up with some good ideas. I wanted to make sure that you actually had time to go and do some more of the things. I have managed to break this, sorry. Fab. Okay. So, yeah, I want to make sure in the last kind of like 5 minutes of the session that you actually get a chance to like do some of those actions that you've just come up with. So if you like came up with an action of like to reduce this uncertainty, I would like to ask someone in this area how competitive it was when they like tried to do their interviews. Then now's a good time to do that. This conference is like full of people that you can ask. There's like a bunch of resources. There's a bunch of like people to talk to. So here are some things that you might want to do. I want to just like, this is like a kind of classic like, okay, if those actions are going to be useful, let's set aside 5 minutes and make sure you actually just like do them right now. So whether it's like messaging someone on Swapcard, or sending an email to someone to schedule a meeting, or just like checking the schedule and like making sure that you go to something, then now is your chance to actually just like do some of those things. And this is basically the last kind of thing that I want to make sure we do before the end of the workshop. So you can carry on chatting if you want to like still finish off some of the things, but I would encourage you to get your phones out and like start actually taking some of these actions. Oh, real quick, one other thing might be like setting aside some time. If you're like, I need to think about this more, put a calendar hold in your diary right now. Okay. Okay, and then last thing, there's a ton of stuff that you can do or use beyond the conference. So there's like a ton of resources out there. You can find ways of connecting up with other people. Maybe one of the magic things is actually just writing up your career's decision in a Google Doc and sharing it with some of the people that you trust the most for comments and advice. One specific thing that I would want to shout out is 80,000 hours advising. That's me in the red. So if you haven't applied to speak with the team and you think that you're interested in the way that 80,000 hours thinks about careers, then we'd be very happy to yeah, please do apply. We can like talk through some of the different options, maybe connect you up with other people, hopefully try and stay in touch afterwards as well. So if you're interested in that, it's 80,000hours.org, and then click on the link to like speak with the team. Cool, thank you so much for coming to the workshop. I hope this was like helpful and like sets you off for the rest of the weekend with like a bunch of like, yeah, enthusiasm and ideas for how you're gonna like make progress on a bunch of these like careers uncertainties. Thanks for coming.